Welcome, Ritvick. I'm so glad that I'm able to see you.
Yeah, me too.
Now, how's your summer been going?
It's been going quite well. Yeah, so I just had boot camp for Mana. So actually, I participated in a competition recently. So it was like very like intense few weeks leading up to that, but it was very fun. And in the end, I did quite well, so I got third. So yeah, I was happy.
Tell me a little bit about what competition was and how did you have to prepare for that?
So it was Cremona International Music Festival. So that normally happens every year. In Italy in Cremona, but this year I had to be online, so I sent my recording video submission um, or through video submission. So leading up to the competition, I would say that the biggest preparation I had to do was really kind of understanding how my repertoire, kind of the character of each piece, and how I could effectively express that through kind of like the notation that the composers wrote. So that was definitely the biggest challenge. Like Bach, I had to make sure I was really careful in terms of bringing out each voice of like the allemande and make sure that I kind of was very graceful throughout the performance of my kind of repertoire. Whereas for the list, the Liebestraum, I had to have more depth in terms of my kind of emotion. It had to be like a little bit more intense. So yeah, that was definitely the biggest challenge. And also just long hours in general. At times it was kind of a little bit hard for me to get through it, but I'm really glad that I kept persevering. So yeah, because I learned a lot.
Congratulations. That's a really a wonderful accomplishment. So you really haven't been resting at all in summer.
No, and honestly, kind of like it because I'm one of those people that kind of goes crazy if they don't have anything to do. So I think that it was a nice kind of addition to kind of have something to work on during the summer. Because yeah, I know I would have just been like kind of lazing around a little bit if it weren't for the camp and such. So I'm really glad that I got to be a part of it.
Now, how did you start piano? How old were you? Do you remember some early fun memories?
Yeah, so I kind of jumped around a lot when it came to kind of like teachers and styles. So I started piano when I think I was 4. So I was very, very casual about it. I kind of started with a very loose, kind of relaxed teacher, and she would just kind of like teach me like all of the famous, like very easy pieces, like, or not very easy pieces, but like pieces that are not like too difficult that you can pick up just by I actually didn't know how to read music at that time, so I she would write out all of the notes for me, and I would just sort of like um, try to memorize it like that. So I learned, I think, the first movement of Moonlight Sonata, and that was like a really, really big project for me at that time. So I was maybe like 4 or 5. So that was like a really massive undertaking, and I just remember being really happy finishing it. And um, yeah, so then yeah, that's how I started music. So and then I've been transitioning teachers until about three years ago, I think it was, when I joined Mana Studio. So yeah, it's been quite a long road to kind of like um, rediscovering almost classical music, because I really wasn't serious about it and I really didn't know much about it until I joined Mana Studio, or maybe a year before I joined Mana Studio, which is when I really got interested.
What is classical music to you? Because other kids, teenagers are listening to other style of music. Art is not very popular with teenagers. Tell me about that journey.
Right. So I definitely do think I don't really remember those days, but I'm sure I had other perceptions about classical music, that it might have been like archaic or whatever. So I didn't really appreciate it very much until I actually started learning it. So I had a jazz piano teacher, and I remember I had to or I mean, I was learning jazz for a while, and it was only really when he gave me my first piece of classical music. I think it was a Shostakovich piece, which I really started to enjoy all of like the nuance and kind of like I tried my best to sort of like on a very sort of amateur level to kind of express the kind of beauty that was inside the music that I had no idea existed before I started learning that piece. So that was kind of my introduction into it. And so even though I remained on a predominantly jazz course throughout my learning with him, I took some side projects learning my um, own kind of like classical music as kind of like a side hobby because I just really enjoyed how it sounded, how it made me feel, and I also kind of used it as a creative outlet too. So to me, it's kind of like an escape where I get to look at what other composers wrote so long ago. I get kind of like a window or a viewpoint into how they were feeling and how it can translate to what I was feeling through their notation and their kind of like words almost. So yeah, I think that it's very cool that I get to be a part of something like that.
Do you remember how you learned to read music? Was it difficult process? And now you know how to read music? Do you look back? Did you wish, oh, you started differently, and how that reading helped you to further your piano study?
I don't want to say wish because I'm like very content where with what I am now and I'm constantly striving to be better and better. So I'm very grateful that I even kind of like learned or started when I did because I could have like discovered my love for it a lot later and that would have been truly tragic. But yeah, I definitely sort of like look back and think, damn, if I started learning how to read music a little bit earlier, that would have been so much more like helpful in my journey now because um I've actually noticed that when it comes to technique, I don't struggle as much, but I do definitely struggle a little bit when it comes to learning the music just because I'm so behind in terms of kind of like um reading music. I only really started reading music about 4 years ago, maybe 1 year before I joined Mana Studio. So it's been very kind of hard to quickly adapt to kind of like all of the new and more advanced repertoire that she's been giving me. But I like really look at it from the viewpoint where it's something that I have to learn and it gets just a little bit easier every time I like look at a new piece. Like there are more patterns that I can call from and my knowledge helps me in that department. So I really think that it's a progressive process and it's something that I've had to learn through kind of many years. And sometimes I do wish that I started earlier, but I think that um, I'm on a good path now.
Do you have a piece that you learned recently or this year that you could show us a bit how you practice, how you learn from the beginning, and what's your process of getting that piece resolved technically, but then musically?
Right. So I would definitely say the Liszt Levis drum that I learned earlier this year in terms of both technical difficulty and like musical difficulty is something that I would say had not the hardest time with, but like the most kind of detailed process in terms of learning. Um, so yeah, I actually had done some very basic groundwork for the piece when I first joined Mana Studio. It was one of the pieces that I kind of like took up as a side project. So it was like very, very unpolished and unready. And so this year, after I had learned a Schumann piece, she decided that I was like sort of ready to kind of like revisit it. So I kind of knew how it sounded, but I completely forgotten how to play it. So, um, yeah, so first what I did was I relearned the music. So I kind of, like there wasn't any like big technical issue that I faced. But, definitely the cadenzas, which are very like virtuosic and fast bits, I definitely had to kind of drill them and just break them down into smaller sections. So what I did for that was that I viewed them in a grouping of 3 notes each, and so I would just get through that grouping and then repeat it because it's a pattern all the way down the scale. So or up the scale. So what I would do is that I would just repeat the pattern in my head and then it would come to my fingers naturally. So that's what I would really kind of like look for when I'm learning challenging music, is just to constantly try to find patterns, because it really like eases your brain so that your fingers can kind of communicate with your brain on a level where there's not just panic everywhere. So yeah, just I think that one of the big things that my piano teacher Mana has taught me, and one of the things that I truly believe now, is that if your mind is constantly talking to your fingers, and if there's a clear communication and there's clear like image in your brain of what everything is supposed to sound like and where everything is supposed to come in, it will happen. So I think that developing that kind of mental fortitude for each piece of music that you play is very important.
How do you try to convey music in a way that you feel like, ah, that's true to the composer's intention, the notes, but then you're part of it, your own creative self that's mixed in with the notes on the music. How do you um, polish your piece and come up with your own interpretation? Do you use some kind of a tools, for instance, the images or books or writing? How do you do that?
So I think that first, what I need to do is I need to become an analyst of the music. I need to look at what the composer really wanted me to say with his music, and I think that's my starting point. So I think that you really need to be deliberate about how you approach the music in terms of dynamic markings. What did the composer mean when they wrote piano? What does this piano mean? Is it like sort of hiding away? Is it mysterious? Is it kind of like very sincere? Is it open? What do they mean by forte? Is it supposed to be grand? Is it supposed to be kind of like angry? Is it supposed to be? So I think that those basic analysis are really helpful in terms of getting a general feel for what the music is, because I think that all of the tools are in what the composer gives you. Even with composers like Bach, who don't like write dynamic markings or slurrings in their music, I think that through context clues and basically on the patterns that he gives you within the music, you can still kind of decipher most of what he meant. It just takes a lot of like brain work and really looking closely. So it's still something that I'm trying to improve on to this day. Um, in terms of developing my own interpretation, I think that I really think about not only what something means to the composer, but I need to convince myself that it's something that was kind of like um, important on sort of um, important to the point where it needs to be kind of expressed. So I think that as long as the general message can stay the same, as long as what the composer intended for you to be kind of like the message that is supposed to be carried out is true for the composer, you can really do anything that you want with it. So you can develop any sort of story or character that you feel like represents the music in an honest way while still being true to yourself. And I think that's really the key to creating like really beautiful music, is making something that is both true to what the composer wants and what you as a musician wants. Because I think that what the composer says and writes should always come first, because after all, it is their music you're performing, but you're allowed to kind of like have a say in terms of kind of like which part of that process is very important to you and what kind of story that you want to tell with your own music.
So what's coming up for you and what the future holds for piano and music?
All I know is that I want music to be a part of my future. So whether that means either um, taking music in college as either a major or minor, or whether that means just doing classes on the side for my own enjoyment, I don't know yet. But I definitely want to continue to participate in festivals, kind of like events all the way through high school, just to kind of like immerse myself while I still can, while I'm not too busy, because I really think that I need to appreciate it just a little bit more.
We're actually very lucky that we're able to learn music and we're able to get lessons, we're able to teach, and there are lots of kids out there actually don't ever have the opportunity.
I really feel as though I've been privileged to, even though I didn't start out classical music super young, and I'm still like learning a lot every day, and I didn't start, yeah, super early. I'm very thankful to have discovered it at all because I don't come from a musical background. None of my parents were really playing instruments. So I think the only reason why I started piano was because my dad showed me some kid in a YouTube video playing it, and I was interested in it. So yeah, I think that music has created such an opportunity for me, and I really want to give back because I'm so grateful that it's become a part of my life now. Yeah, I really don't know what I would do without it. So yeah.